Welcome everyone, Renfail here, and we are back for another Lord of the Rings Online game guide. And today we're discussing, well, what if it's your first time? Have you never played this game before? If you haven't, what's the best class to play as a completely new player? What's going to help you get through the game and see all of the content that you want to see? The best part about this is that as of 2023, there's no limitation on which class you want to play in terms of survivability or viability. Every single one of these classes is viable. You can solo all the way to the max level if you want to. You never have to group up with other people if you don't want to. But if you have friends and you want to get involved in the group side of this game, you can absolutely do that as well. But we're going to be making this video assuming that you're a new player who's never played Lord of the Rings Online before and you just want to sink your teeth into it for the first time and check it out and see what it's like. Is this game worth playing? Is it fun? Is it Tolkien-esque? Does it have all the things in Middle-earth that I want or need to enjoy myself? By the way, the answer to all those questions is yes. So let's dive in. What is the best class to play if you've never played this game before? So if you've ever played an MMORPG before, or even if you haven't, there's some basic rundown that you have to understand. You're always going to have your tank classes, kind of like the Guardian or the Warden, who originally were based as these like tank classes, or the dual-wielding champion, who was a DPS class, or the hunter, who was a single-target DPS class, or the Loremaster, who was like a crowd control with a little bit of utility and DPS, and the Minstrel, who used to be a healer. But the reality is that these days, all of these classes, and you can find more information about these in the individual class guides that I've done here on YouTube, each one of these classes comes with 3 different trait trees, essentially. 3 different ways that you could specialize that character to play in whatever style suits you. So looking at the Minstrel as an example, you can not only play the Minstrel as a healer, but you can switch that character to be a DPS character or a balanced hybrid between the two. So it just depends on how do you want to play your Minstrel. The same thing can go for the Guardian as an example. Originally, these had a role as a defensive character, but these days with the trait trees, you can actually go in and you can say, well, I want to be a DPS Guardian. I want to do damage over time, or I want to be, a debuffer as opposed to just being a straight up defensive tank. And then the Hunter, as an example, has a lot of options based on whether or not you want to be doing lots of damage as a stationary character versus being able to fire your arrows on the fly while doing less DPS, or leveraging the power of traps and snares as opposed to doing lots of ranged DPS. So all of these classes have different ways that they can be played. Again, more information in the class guides, because we're not going to dive into all of that breakdown in this video, although it's worth mentioning in sort of an overview context. There are a few options that I'd like to present to players who are playing for the first time and want to know what is the best class to get going in the Lord of the Rings Online. If you want pure survivability, I am always going to point people towards the Guardian. It is the simplest of the characters to play. It's really, really easy to play this class. You can get in, you get plate armor, you get a shield, you have complete survivability, and no matter which way you spec your Guardian, you will be able to take on multiple foes at the same time and mow them down with easy, especially if you go red line, which is the DPS line, because then you get the survivability and the DPS, and you can take on 8-10 mobs at a time without any problems. And it's not hard to play because it's literally just the rotation of, say, 6 to 8 buttons, so there's not a lot of skill required to play this class. It's just walk into the middle of the mobs, do damage, you'll have some abilities that help you boost your defense, self-heal, and so on and so forth. It's a very survivable class. Outside of that, I would argue that the Hunter is probably the maybe the better option, and the reason for that is because the Hunter has the ability to fast travel between destinations. Now, you don't get all the locations at the beginning of the game, you do get those as you level up. So the ability to get around the world quickly is much easier when you're playing a Hunter. Now, they are a high DPS class, with the sacrifice of being that they're not that tough. They're a little squishy. So where you could take 8 or 10 mobs on with the Guardian, you have to be much more careful with the Hunter. traditionally, depending on whether or not you're using traps or not, depending on how you're spec'd, you can generally handle between, say, 3 to 5 mobs at any given time, depending on your skill level, but that's keeping things at range, because once they get up on you, if you've got 3 mobs hitting on you as a hunter, you better be able to burn them down fast, because you're going to be quite squishy compared to the Guardian, and you will go down rather quickly, although there are some defensive abilities that can help you survive in those types of scenarios. So if you just want something that's pure survivability, and you don't want to have to think a lot, and you just want to be able to wade through the content of the game and have a very easy experience, I would argue that the Guardian is going to be the best option for you. If you want something that's a little more tricky to play, but you're going to chew through the mobs much more quickly, and you'll get fast travel, which allows you to get around the world much easier and much more quickly, then you're going to go with the Hunter. Now, after that, I would say that the Minstrel is quite possibly one of the most versatile choices that you're going to be able to pick in the Lord of the Rings Online, because of the fact that they can either be straight up heals, they do some pretty significant DPS, or you can take the hybrid stance when you're playing the game, which allows you to do a little bit of both, and you can self-heal as you're going along, which gives you the survivability of not quite a tank, but you can definitely hold your own while also doing a significant amount of DPS. But you also have the ability to then go into the healing stance, so that if you're grouped up with other players, you can very easily and quickly switch on the fly and start doing only heals for your group, as opposed to doing DPS when you're on your own. It's very, very versatile. And after that, I would say probably the fourth option, which is kind of the last of the easy options, would be the Loremaster. And the reason I say the Loremaster is because this is a somewhat more complex character to play. It's the more complex out of the 4 that I've listed as the best starting classes for new players. But they get pets. And if you spec down the pet line in that trait tree, again, more information in the class videos, you can make your pet extremely durable, and you can literally become the DPS character while your pet is handling all the tanking for you. And the Loremaster is a combination of debuffs, DPS, AoEs, crowd control, all while letting your pet handle the bulk of the damage. That's the solo build. Now, if you're going to be playing with other players, there's a crowd control build and a debuff build, AoE kind of damage build as well. So depending on if you're going to be playing alone or with others, the Loremaster is a very solid choice. My highest level character is actually a Loremaster. He's off in Minas Tirith right now, looking for Faramir, actually, in Osgiliath. I love that character. I love the Loremaster. They do not have the DPS of the Hunter or the Minstrel, so they do take a little longer to get through the content, but I find them to be incredibly versatile in terms of the way they're played, and they can easily fit into a group or a solo setting at will. The rest of these I would consider to be things that aren't necessarily for new players, but if you've ever played an MMORPG before, you might want to try them. The Warden is the most complex because it relies upon a variety of combo moves, which I don't recommend for new players. The Rune Keeper can be a healer or a DPS, but they are extremely squishy and situationally can be tricky to play. The Champion is really easy if you want to just mow things down with 2 different weapons while wearing heavy armor, but I think that they do, in my opinion, they play better in a group setting as opposed to a solo setting, because the Guardian gives you the survivability of the Guardian with really good DPS, even though you're not necessarily dual wielding. And I found that the Champion can be a little squishier when you're doing solo content. So if you have a good group that you're playing with, the Champion might be a great option, because you could just be the DPS for the group. And then the Captain, not a lot of DPS at all. This is going to be, I would not recommend playing a Captain unless you're going to be playing with other people, especially if that group needs to have DPS, because the Captain does not do a lot of DPS. Unless you've spec'd in the red line, which takes a long time to get to the point where you're doing even a significant amount of DPS. These guys are mostly about utility and backup heals. Brawler I've actually yet to play, so I can't comment on that one. Burglar is complex, and is more of a utility / debuffer as opposed to a DPS. But because they're the only character that can trigger fellowship maneuvers in parties, they're usually very sought after in groups. But I don't necessarily recommend them as a solo character. that's just my personal choice. And then, of course, the Bjorning is another solid option if you just want to wade into the middle of things and have decent survivability. They do good damage. They're a good support role backup. They are pretty decent solo class, and they're unique in that they were added to the game after the fact, and they have their own unique starting area and stuff, and they're based on Bjorn, of course. But these are a little more complex than, say, the Guardian or the Hunter, so these are one of those things where maybe after you've played a couple of times. So, in any case, that's my pick for what I think are some solid options if you've never played the game before and you're looking for what are some of the best classes to play as a new player. I would say, Guardian, Hunter, Minstrel, Loremaster, those are my top 4 picks for you to try out and sink your teeth into the game. I personally love the Hunter. It's probably my favorite. Even though my Loremaster is higher level than my Hunter, I think the Hunter is my favorite class out of all of these. They're just a hell of a lot of fun to play. But the Guardian can be really cool in terms of the way you can set up your armor, and you can make yourself a Minas Tirith and have a background that's just really full of lore and roleplay. So, food for thought. Anyway, if you liked my gameplay guide for Lord of the Rings Online, do me a solid. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update as I continue to provide good content for everybody here on YouTube. Thanks to those of you who have been supporting my journey as a full-time content creator. I went full-time in February of 2022, thanks to the support of all of my amazing community members. All of you folks who are members here on YouTube, thanks so much. If you want to join, there's 3 different tiers down below. We have a Patreon page as well. And here on YouTube, you can do some really cool things with super chats and stickers on live streams and premieres where you can just pick a pre-programmed amount, click the button, and it donates that, or you can pick your own amount. But you can also do super thanks after videos are uploaded, and you can do super thanks on YouTube Shorts as well. And again, it's pre-programmed, or you can plug in your own amount, so $2, $50, $500, whatever you're comfortable contributing to the cause to keep me on the air full-time. I really appreciate those of you who support me and let me do this with Chris on a full-time basis here on YouTube. Thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the world of Middle-earth and the Lord of the Rings Online, and I'll see everybody in the next video.